Hi, I'm Arthur, and this is part 17 in a 20-part series I am doing a bit more of a deep dive into the Primarchs of each of the legions in order of the legions. Do you need to have seen the other parts to understand this one? No, but it would make me happy. This video is going to be fun. I think that I have a lot to say about the particular subject of today's little soiree. And I'm gonna try my best to speak my truth and try to be as funny as possible while doing so. The topic, the target, and the lovely individual we are covering is the kind-hearted giant, the Primarch of the 18th, the one, the only, Vulkan. Winner of several Best Hug competitions, as well as responsible for at least one or two war crimes in his day, Vulkan is a pretty fun lad. I think with all the Primarchs combined, it's easy to say that he is the kindest and also one of the most beloved. There's this thing that, I don't know what the name of it is, but there's probably a term for it. It might just be hindsight biased. But if I ever went to someone and was like, hey, what's your favorite Primarch? And their response was Alfarius. My immediate response is, oh, why is that? Not because there's anything wrong with any of the Primarchs or that I judge Alfarius for his mere existence, but usually because when someone picks one of the weirder dudes, I feel there is either a justification or a story behind it that I'm curious to learn more about. But if someone ever says Vulkan, I literally don't need any further explanation. He's just kind of cool, is all. Same with like Gilliman, Rogel Dorn, and the like, you know, the guys that are like you could immediately understand the appeal of. They're all solid choices, and I think that Vulkan is kind of the top of the heap there. He exemplifies the concept where my exact response whenever someone says Vulkan is just, nah, I get you. I understand the person on a spiritual level after that. He is one of those guys that if you identify with him, I bet you're pretty chill. But yeah, we do have a lot to cover as per the usual. So I'll do my normal formula. Discuss his relationship with his family, discuss his relationship with the Emperor, discuss his relationship with his legion, all that fun stuff. But I gotta cover his start, where he began and who he is personally. Before I get into any of that, I just want to say, if you like the video, make sure to like the video. If you like me, and you think I'm cute, then subscribe, as it helps a lot. Use code BONEZONE at checkout for 10% off GamerSupps purchases, or click the link in the description, and let's hop in, shall we? Vulkan, during the scattering of the Primarchs, was sent to a planet that I only marginally hesitate to call a shithole, because I feel like I overuse that, but it kinda is. Like, it's a sun-baked volcanic planet by the name of Nocturn, and it is literally covered with dragon-like creatures called Salamanders, which are, well, they're dragons that are more or less immune to fire. He was adopted by some random blue-collar worker by the name of Unbal, who basically saw Vulkan as kind of a mythical, prophesized, chosen whatever. Which, when you reach 6 feet tall, by the age of, like, 4, have glowing red eyes, and have literally fallen from the fucking sky in a burning meteor, which, yeah, I'd probably be a bit invested in the child's safety after that. Yeah, it does make a lot of sense why he came to that conclusion. The thing with Vulkan is he was taught the trade of blacksmithing, as Inbal is just kind of a regular guy, a commoner. And this leads into what, you know, Vulkan and all the other Primarchs kind of tended towards, which is when they were taught a skill, they immediately became the best at it. But there is an important distinction to make with Vulkan. See, with, say, Perturabo or First Manus, it was kind of a similar situation where they were taught a specific trade or craft, usually around the creation of metallic goods, and they just became the best of it. But with Perturabo, Ferrus Manus, and, you know, any other craftsman Primarchs, you find that there isn't a level of passion there. It is a dispassionate idealism, this idea of I am the best, therefore I make the best things to suit whatever needs that I have. Meanwhile, Vulkan, it kind of comes off to me that he creates things for the purpose of creation. He enjoys the process of blacksmithing, and so he does it. He does things that he likes because he likes doing them. There doesn't really need to be a reason for him to do it, he just does it because he wants to. And that leads to his artisanal equipment to have a bit more flair to them, if you mind the pun. But yes, at the heart of Vulkan is passion for his art, and I think that's a very endearing thing, but we'll come back to that later. Vulkan does things because he wants to, not because he's told to, so we'll stick a pin in that specific idea for a little corkboard for later. But yeah, Vulkan, as is with most Primarchs, grew up to help the people of Nocturn, and in a way we can all agree is fair, balanced, and even fun by slaughtering a shitload of Dark Eldar. Yeah, Nocturn had a bit of a Dark Eldar problem, and thus he kind of developed a hatred for them early, like any based man should. But yeah, After purging the Dark Eldar from Nocturn and making it very evident that they should not fucking return, and being considered a pretty cool guy, having done so, Vulkan entered into a competition. A bunch of tests of strength to bolster their morale, as well as celebrate everything that's going on Nocturn with a bunch of the other common folk. Here's where something particularly interesting happened, though. See, during the celebration, a stranger appeared. He was kind of out of place, a pale man in robes that seemed of a material that didn't really fit Nocturne, and no one could really place exactly where it would have come from. He was not from the lands, obviously, and he was also incredibly pale, which on a planet that's baked in sun as much as this wouldn't exactly survive that long. But yeah, he showed up and talked one hell of a big fucking game, but yeah, basically he stated that he could best any man on Nocturne in any challenge. Now, see, everybody here was gassing up Vulkan because bro is like Ronnie Coleman skilled up. Vulkan, always humble, accepted the challenge and allowed the stranger to compete. Most people kind of bowed out after they realized that the dude who came around out of nowhere, yeah, he was kind of not McFucking around, as him and Vulkan were actually comparable in skill at all ends of the spectrum, with competitions of strength, cunning, tactics, intelligence, all being neck and neck for the majority of these competitions. It came to the final trial, the final game, to see who would be the victor of this, I guess, competition between brotherly, manly men. So, two things. One, the stranger was capping to hell and back, as by his own admission he could best any man at any challenge, and in order for him and Vulkan to have been tied, he would have had to at least lose a few games, so fuck him, I guess. The second thing is that this meant that it would come down to the final challenge, and I forgot to mention what the stakes were, as there is a lot on the line. Whoever lost the challenges at the end would have to swear fealty to the other and pledge service for eternity. So to say there was a lot on the line is a bit of an understatement. Regardless, Vulkan and this stranger had to embark upon the final challenge, which was craft a weapon in 1 or 2 days and then go out and kill a salamander, drag its corpse back to the judges, and whoever had the biggest salamander would be declared the winner. Now, as weird as it is to say, this is kind of going to be where I diverge a bit from what everybody else believes. Though, don't yell at me, I'm literally like 6 years old and also an idiot. So, I haven't read the entirety of the Horus Heresy yet, so this could probably be proven wrong later. But how the story goes is the stranger and Vulkan created weapons. The stranger made a very finely created sword, and Vulkan made a hammer because hammers are cool. Vulkan had been the first one to find a big salamander, one of the biggest ones he'd ever seen, before the stranger did, obviously. But due to a sudden eruption of the active volcano that they were on, Vulkan's life was kind of on the line here. See, in one hand, he clutched the tail of the salamander, refusing to let go, and on the other hand, he gripped the ledge of the mountain itself. Magma flow was kind of right beneath him, so if he let go, he would die, but if he dropped the salamander, he would lose the challenge because he had no more time to do it. He hung on there for hours upon hours upon hours until he was losing grip. Eventually, the stranger shows up, holding an even bigger salamander than that of what Vulkan would have, but in a show of compassion, the stranger throws the salamander into a thick bed of lava and uses it as a platform to jump on. See, salamanders are resistant to heat, so he had enough time to get across, but the salamander was still destroyed in the end. He shows up, grabs Vulkan, saves his life, and even saves his salamander. They head back to the competition judging grounds. Vulkan wins because he has a salamander, and the stranger does not. And this is when it's revealed that the stranger, whose surprise prize was actually the Emperor of Mankind. Who the fuck else would it be, dude? But yeah, there are several interpretations of the scene, and mine is optimistic. But the main way people see this is it was a ploy by the Emperor to convince Vulkan through kind actions to serve him, as he could probably tell that this big lug wouldn't truly serve him if he had just won. So showing this kind act was a way to easily sway Vulkan to his side. I think it is kind of nihilistic to see the Emperor in such a light. I like to think that the Primarchs are actually each shards in some way of the Emperor's personality made manifest. Now, there is also the impact that the societies they were sent to have on them, which is mixed in and kind of dilutes it. But the inherent kindness and compassion that is in Vulkan, I believe, is also in the Emperor. I think the Emperor was being genuine when saving Vulkan. Because, I mean, realistically, would Vulkan say no after the Emperor revealed himself to be his actual dad? I think that all worked out, literally, because real respects real. I think it's so fucking cool that the Emperor chose to be kind as well. In all honesty, he didn't need to go through all this. He could have just shown up and before the competitions even began, been like, yeah, I'm endorsing Vulkan and I'm gonna send my best champions and we're gonna have a great time. There's so many different ways he could have done it, but instead he decided to sacrifice the win, sacrifice his pride, go against the expectations he set, and still, you know, lose the competition and get Vulkan on his side. I do think that there is probably multiple perspectives at play here, because the Emperor, I think, is a very complicated individual. I think that there is always more than one specific angle that he is working at any given point. Does that mean that he was inherently cruel and just doing it to manipulate Vulkan? I don't fucking know, I'm an idiot. Or is he doing it because he's kind? I like to think it's probably a mixture of 5 different motivations behind it, like he does with everything else, but I like to think the more optimistic look at it. But yeah, the same old song and dance occurs. The Emperor recruited this lovely, the huggable man into his armies, and with all that sorted, he got to work with his legion, the Dragon Warriors, which he renamed in honor of his duel with the Emperor to the Salamanders, which I think is cute. But before we get into that, I kind of want to go on a brief aside about something that is only partially related, but no one ever brings up, or at least no one that I've ever seen. But yeah, 1 second, let's just take a brief intermission. We're doing this again. Okay, cool. Sorry about the video being late, by the way. You know, it's about a few minutes to an hour if I'm reading this correctly. It's been one hell of a crunch time because, next week I'm going to LVO, so I'm getting a lot of this done beforehand, and this is one of the last ones that I have to get done. So, yeah. Hi. Hello. How are you? Hope you're enjoying the video so far. I just wanted to take a minute to just discuss a topic that I think is weird that no one really brings it up, or at least no one I've ever seen really talk about it. And that's that when the Emperor actually abducts his Primarch sons, he brings them back to Terra and just kind of lets them chill there for as long as they want. I don't even think there's a time limit. I think that in general, he takes them to Terra to teach them the entirety of the history of the Imperium of mankind, teach them the ways, teach them the languages, and then lets them tinker around with whatever technology they want. I know that the adjustment period is described as weird at the best of times, and I know that some Primarchs adapt to it better, but this is basically so that they get as much time as they want with the Emperor of mankind before they're set off into the universe, so that they know what they're fighting for rather than just fighting and dying for absolutely fuck all nothing. Now, there is some interesting notes to be had here. Apparently, Vulkan was one of the most pleasant ones to be around when he was on Terra, though Malcador, if I remember correctly, was very opposed to the level of hugs and kindness and physical gestures that Vulkan would give. I think it's very interesting that they never bring that up, because it's such an interesting idea that that is where they get their idea of humanity, from its core, from its center, as well as a mixture from their home planet. As it stands, I think that Vulkan is one of the quicker to be dispatched Primarchs from the planet, leaving to go help his sons on a different faraway world like I'm about to mention. I think contextually, the Primarch who took the absolute longest to leave Terra was Jagatai Khan, though I don't think we have reference for many other Primarchs. I would love to see how long it took Curze to say, fuck this, I'm leaving, but you know, it is what it is. Regardless, that was just an aside that I wanted to bring up because no one ever talks about it. And yeah, we're just gonna get back to the video. Hope you're enjoying the Vulkan video so far. Hope you like the little random trivia fact that I'm just spitting here. Use code BONEZONE at checkout for 10% off GamerSupps purchases, as well as supporting the boy. If you're at LVO next week and you see someone who looks vaguely like how you think I sound, I don't know, harass me. But yeah, back to the video. Okay, with that bullshit out of the way, let's get into the second half of the video. Vulkan meeting his legion is one of the most emblematic relationships I've ever seen between Primarchs and legions. See, when a Primarch meets a legion, it usually sets the tone for their entire relationship, for the most part. Perturabo meeting the Iron Warriors and demanding they decimate themselves due to recent failure, then Angron having be sent to gay baby jail for a bit too long due to him throwing a bit of a tantrum when he was beamed aboard the ship before he could, you know, die with his friends, and then probably slaughtering quite a few of his own world eaters. It just goes to show how the relationship is going to progress in the future. But with Vulkan, it's a bit different. See, the Dragon Warriors were fighting a massive orc incursion on some planet. They had a massive predilection towards self-sacrifice, so they were losing numbers rather rapidly. Vulkan has been sent there to help with 3,000 new recruits that were raised from Nocturn, the first Nocturn initiates. Also, fun fact, while this was going on, the Lion and 2 other of the unknown Primarchs were actually battling the Rangda, which is really weird that this is happening at the same time, because I feel like Vulkan probably should have been sent there, but like, you know. Vulkan appeared on this planet to save his sons at the last minute, rallying his troops and basically saving the day. His sons almost genetically knew he was their gene sire, a legend in the flesh, someone that they share a tangible heritage with. So they instinctively knelt in appreciation of his support, but in a show of his character, Vulkan actually told them not to. He told them that they had been fighting long before he showed up, and he was simply the final hammer blow force to aid them. He should be kneeling to them, as they are the true heroes here, and sons of him true and blue. Which is such a fucking Vulkan thing to do. Dude, he praised them for their heroics, their compassion, and their willingness to sacrifice it all if it meant that they could save just a few more civilians. They truly were genetically his kids, and this dude was happy as can be about that. So, cut ahead, and you have yourself one of the happiest legions out there. Sort of. Well, happy when they aren't dealing with, like, Dark Eldar, which is pretty common, as they did enjoy dealing with Dark Eldar from time to time, but that would get really dark really quick. And when I say dealing with them, I actually mean war criming them to death with flame-based weaponry. Now that we kind of have an idea of him up to the Horus Heresy, let's kind of talk about what actually happened during the Heresy, at least touch upon it before we get into, like, my wrap-up of the video. As there was kind of a lot that happened to Vulkan during the Heresy. He didn't do a lot, but a lot happened to him. There isn't much detail needed other than Vulkan kinda got fucked over from the start, but in general, so you know the Istvan 5 Dropsite massacre, where a lot of loyalist forces were deployed to apprehend Horus and a few of the traitor forces that were down there, only to find out that half of the reinforcements that were sent were actually traitors and slaughtered the majority of the loyalist forces there? Well, the Salamanders were a part of that, which is, not good. So a lot, if not most, Salamanders were killed during this excursion. Check out my Promethean Kings video to know a bit more about that. But in general, the idea to self-sacrifice to save the others kinda cost Salamanders the majority of their ranks at this time. It even led to Vulkan getting a nuke dropped on him from orbit, killing him with his sons. Okay, sort of. See, this is where we find out that Vulkan is something that is referred to as a perpetual, like his father. Vulkan is kind of a true immortal. You can throw him into the heart of a star and somehow he will respawn a short while later, and might I add, also he will be incredibly pissed off. So he did that, but all good things have to come to an end, and he ended up getting captured by the Night Haunter, which, if I may be frank, in the top 5 worst fates to be possible in 40k, I'd say being captured by the Night Haunter is likely the worst, with a close second being Hanzo existing on the same planet as you, but I digress. So Curze, being the girly pop he is, decided to torture Vulkan in as many ways as he possibly could think of. Finding out that Vulkan could actually never truly die, he just dedicated a huge swath of time to torturing him and trying to break him mentally and psychologically. He would put him into tests that would completely break down Vulkan's character, or at least attempt to, such as an area filled with civilians with a massive anvil over it and affixed to a massive chain, and Vulkan had to be the only person to stop the chain from dropping on top of them. It was basically to make him give up and crush them early, just because, like, you know, it's kind of a foregone conclusion, but that's kind of the interesting part. He held the weight until he couldn't do it anymore, because even though the end point is kind of predetermined, the struggle is what matters most here. But death after death, time after time, Vulkan would never break, and his morals would never be sacrificed. And this all led to the ultimate final battle between Curze and Vulkan, where Curze left Vulkan's super magic special super mega hammer Dawnbringer at the end of this massive labyrinth that was constructed in his honor. See, Dawnbringer had a teleporter inside of it that Vulkan could use to teleport back to his ship and get to safety. And, you know, all he had to do was just go find it. It took an uncomfortable amount of time, but he did it. He found his hammer after being murdered over and over and over by Curze. He hefted the hammer and pressed the teleport button to find it wasn't working. The hammer's tech shit had not been working at all. Curze laughed at Vulkan's face, having appeared from the shadows behind him just to taunt him, to tell him that he was a fool for ever believing that he would let his prize leave so easily, that it was so funny seeing him try and fail, that he had stripped the teleport bullshit from the first second it landed in his tech bay. Curze wanted to drink in the misery of Vulkan realizing that he truly couldn't escape, but Curze was interrupted by Vulkan stating a simple fact. "You're forgetting one thing, brother," to which Curze, still amused, asked, "Oh, and what's that?" Without hesitating, Vulkan kind of puts his hammer in both hands and simply says, "It is also a hammer." He proceeds to beat the ever-loving shit out of Curze and berate him through the entire endeavor, which was really satisfying to watch, even as someone who's a bit of a Night Lords fan. It was a pretty fun experience, and the sentence, "it is also a hammer," has kind of become a bit of a vocal stim for me. It's pretty fun. Regardless, the end point of all this is Vulkan disappeared. There was a lot of steps of him having weird pain dementia, but like, I'm not that far read in the Horus Heresy, but we'll get there someday, I promise. But he ended up disappearing, and there's a lot of other smaller bits, like he did come back for the War of the Beast and then disappeared again, but he kind of pulled a Lehman and said that "I will return once certain criteria are appeased," which with Vulkan seems a lot more reasonable than what Lehman did, because what Lehman said was, "I will return when shit is really bad," which, well, shit's kind of really bad right now, so I guess that means it has to be bad-er. No, Vulkan, what he did was he basically said, if you collect my 9 super magical special whatever artifacts, then I'll return. Which they've been doing a pretty good job of collecting them. But we don't really know where Vulkan is. We know that he disappeared, probably goes on a soul-searching mission, and wants to test his sons to see if they're going to maintain his level of kindness and his level of protection of the civilians. So, doing this video, I have gained a much greater appreciation for Vulkan than I did before, to the point where I have been looking at Salamanders in a different light. I love the miniatures, especially for the Horus Heresy. I love just the aesthetic of them, and I love the fact that they are kind. But Vulkan himself, he's a good guy. His Legion are good guys. He is a fun dude to hang out with, and honestly, I don't think I'd want it any other way. But the thing I admire most about Vulkan is kind of ubiquitous to the setting, and that is the indomitable might of the human spirit, but not in the way that we are a wrathful species and will burn the entire universe down, a society of individuals dedicated to war. No, it's more, we are primitive, yes, but at our core, we do seek the betterment of others. We do seek to make the lives of our fellow man and woman better. The fact that Vulkan and his sons are willing to sacrifice themselves in order to save people who are, by all facts of the matter, less than them in terms of usefulness, not just because they were told, or not just because it was an order or some genetic imperative, but because it was the right thing to do, it makes me enjoy this setting more. I think pacifism and kind acts in a vacuum mean literally nothing, less than nothing, honestly. If someone in my relatively low violent crime rate, albeit high drug arrest rate, island came to me and said, yes, I oppose violence and I'm a pacifist, then it just comes off as moral posturing, because, well, you're never really confronted with some kind of situation where you have the choice to overcome that or to stick to your ideals there. But that's why I enjoy Vulkan. With those individuals, you're just supposed to infer that if they were ever in a position to decide between violence and non-violence, that they will always choose violence, but they're never going to be put into that situation. But I think the inverse is where it's important, and why the Salamanders are one of my favorite chapters in Legions of Marines. That is because, well, they are the good men in a universe filled with monsters who punish good men. They're the people who, even if it means they will sacrifice themselves, they will do it every time if it means means just saving one person who cannot protect themselves. They will do it no matter what. Not because they are predisposed to do so, not because it was something they were told to do. They will do it because it is the right thing to do. It's the kind thing to do, which is why salamanders stick out. They actively put themselves in harm's way, not just because they are space marines and they are the sword of the Imperium, but because they are the shield of the people of the Imperium. They know that you're not just supposed to attack the things that are trying to destroy your way of life, but defend your way of life as well. A lot of Marines tend to forget that. It's why some of my favorite interactions in the setting are between Black Templars and Salamanders, as they are two opposite sides of the same coin. Salamanders have never forgotten. They are the shield that protects the weak, and Vulkan is the distillation of that. Vulkan is a champion of humanity, and I love him as a character. I think we can all learn a lot from Vulkan. To do the right thing even if it comes at great personal cost to ourselves. So with all that being said, of course we are kicking off the new year with an Erebus video followed by a fucking Vulkan video. Why the fuck else would it be any different here? I think it's on brand for this channel. Regardless, thank you all for watching, and make sure to let me know what you think of Vulkan in the comments and what kind of content you'd like to see coming in with the new year. Special thanks to my channel members for supporting me. And if you want to support me as well as gain access to early or additional content, then become a channel member today. As a heads up, thanks again for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful year.